Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Stillman, and I am the K2 Literacy PD Specialist here at the Louisiana Department of Education. And I'm incredibly excited to bring you guys to the second session in our Teacher Professional Development series focused on the science of reading. Today's session is going to focus exclusively on word recognition. Just a little about me in case you weren't here for our first session. My name is Sarah Stillman, and like I mentioned before, I am the K2 Literacy PD Specialist here at the Louisiana Department of Education. If you need to contact me for any reason, you can feel free to email me at sarah.stolman@la.gov. We also want to encourage people to participate in a conversation about the science of reading using the hashtag Louisiana Literacy. So if you're, an avid social media user, definitely use that hashtag to participate in this conversation. Just a little housekeeping, because this is a large group. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you guys to make sure that your microphone is muted, and if your video, turn off your video, so you can hover in that bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and the stop video icon will come up, and just click on that and make sure there's a red line through it. That just helps us save bandwidth and prevents any sort of connectivity issues or anything like that. If you have any questions throughout the meeting or anything you need to share, definitely use the chat feature for that. And if you have any accessibility needs, you can always contact the LDOE Communications Department at ldoecommunications@la.gov, and they'll be happy to help you out. As we mentioned yesterday, when we had our engage question, we encouraged you guys to respond to that question either through emailing me or tweeting on social media or on Facebook using the hashtag Louisiana Literacy and hashtag Reading Revival. We did select our door prize winners, and the following teachers are the winners of our door prizes. So these are a set of phonemic awareness activity cards, and we're going to send those to you. So the winners for that are Tracy Reed, Novase Francisco, and Kimberly France. So if you are one of those people, send me your address at sarah.stolman@louisiana.gov, and I will mail you your prize right away. And again, don't forget to send me your response today. You can email it to me, or you can tweet it to be included in our drawing next week. So definitely don't forget to do that. Okay, so just a recap of our last session. In our last session, we spent some time defining what the science of reading is and what the science of reading is not. We also discussed those dual strands of Scarborough's reading rope and those two components reflected in the simple view of reading. And we discussed what skilled reading looks and sounds like. So we did all of those things in our last session. But today's objective, and my goal for you by the end of this session, is that you're going to be able to explain the role of word recognition in the science of reading. And you're also going to be able to explain how the subcomponents of word recognition, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition shape a student's ability to read with automaticity. Now, you'll remember this infographic that we introduced yesterday. This is Scarborough's reading rope. And this reading rope reflects all the things that strong, good, skilled readers are proficient with, right? And as they become increasingly strategic with their language comprehension, and as they become increasingly automatic with their word recognition, these strands weave together to create skilled readers. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this bottom strand of the reading rope and the threads that are embedded within that strand. We're going to focus today on word recognition. Now, word recognition involves phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. And that's not to be confused with sight words. And we're going to talk about that in this, later in our presentation. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that right now. Now, these particular skills are woven together over time so that word recognition becomes automatic, Automatic word recognition is necessary for students to become fluent readers. So if a student is to really read so that they can understand what they're reading, they have to be at a point where the vast majority of the words that they read, they're really reading by sight. They're able to recognize those words automatically, and they're not spending time laboring over those. But it's only through teaching phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, teaching students the sounds that different letters make and building their capacity to decode, that they'll actually get to that point. We're in no way advocating that they memorize words or anything like that. In fact, that can be very counterproductive, right? But that's the ultimate goal of our work, is that they get to that point where they can recognize words by sight. And that is the focus of the word recognition strands here in Scarborough's Reading Rope. Now we're going to talk about this first thread, because this is often the one that we start with, and this is essential. And it's also one we tend to kind of rush through, or maybe we don't see it directly connected to reading, but it is directly connected to reading. And it's essential that students are proficient with this if they're going to be fluent and skilled readers. Now, phonological awareness, this includes identifying and manipulating units of oral language. So any unit of oral language, words in a sentence, syllables, onsets and rhymes. And this work, they often say, it can be done in the dark. It does not have to be done in the dark. But the idea is that the students don't need to use their eyes at all to do this work. The only thing that they need are their ears and maybe their mouth. The words and the letters are not displayed. Once you add words and letters, then the focus is totally different. With phonological awareness, children are listening for parts of words. They're breaking those apart. They're substituting, they're deleting, they're doing all of these things, but it's all auditory, and then they're communicating it orally. So, this is such essential work. Now, interestingly, an interesting little tidbit of information is that kindergarten students who display struggles with phonological awareness, that's heavily predictive of struggles in second grade reading. So you know that if a young student is really struggling when it comes to phonological awareness, without some really targeted remediation, you can pretty much bet that they're going to be struggling with reading by the time they get to second grade. So this isn't something that we just kind of gloss over and jump straight to the text. This is very important work. Now, when it comes to phonological awareness, there are four main levels. The word, right? Can they distinguish whether or not that's a single word? If you give them a sentence, how many words are in the sentence? Or do they not even have an understanding that if I say the cat is black, they can't tell me that there are 4 words in that sentence, or they can't isolate a word? Then we move on to the syllable. Can they break apart a word into syllables? Then can they break it up into the onset and the rhyme? And when we refer to onset and rhyme, the onset is the first phoneme or sound that they hear in a word up to that first vowel sound. And then the rhyme is that first vowel sound and all that remains in the word, right? And then we get to the phoneme level. That's the highest level of phonological awareness, right? Where they can identify the phonemes. And phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in spoken language. So if I give a child a word, can they tell me all of the different phonemes in the word? Can they break that word apart? If I say, tell me the sounds you hear in the word cat, can they say at? Or maybe at the beginning of kindergarten, if you say, tell me all the sounds you hear in the word cat, you might have had the experience where they just say cat, right? Or they might go at, right? But they're not necessarily at the point of isolating each of those phonemes. So being able to isolate each of those phonemes is a higher level than being able to just break it apart into its onset and rhyme. Now, examples of how you might do this in your class include clapping out syllables, giving your students words and having them clap out the number of syllables they hear in those words. If I say, tell me how many syllables you hear in the word jaguar, you want them to be able to go jaguar, 2, right? Cat, cat, 1. Or if I'm trying to work with onset and rhyme, I might have the students, okay, what is the first sound that you hear in the word mat? And then what is the last part of that word? At, at, mat, right? And then also, we really want them to be able to identify rhyming words. A great way to do that is through nursery rhymes. Read them those nursery rhymes. They love them, right? We always kind of lament that we don't teach our kids nursery rhymes, but what a great way for you to introduce rhyming words to them and have them identify those words that rhyme. Now, part of phonological awareness is phonemic awareness. So phonological awareness includes like identifying all of these different units or parts of words, but phonemic awareness actually drills down just a little bit deeper, and it refers to that specific ability to focus on and manipulate the individual phonemes in spoken words. Now remember, the phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in the English, in the spoken language, right? So all of those letter sounds that we teach, those are the phonemes, right? And then we actually have 44 phonemes, about 44 phonemes in the English language. So we do have some other phonemes like ch, sh, that are multiple letters, right? We call those digraphs, things like that. But phonemic awareness refers to the specific ability to focus on and manipulate individual sounds and words. And this work can also be done in the dark. They don't need their eyes for this work. So the words and the letters are not displayed. Examples of this type of work would be orally blending and segmenting sounds and words, tapping and sweeping the sounds that they hear in those words, and then maybe some phoneme substitution and deletion activities. You know, if I'm a kindergartner or a first grade teacher, I might say, okay, let's listen for the sounds in the word rat, and we might tap and sweep, at, rat, right? And then as I get more sophisticated, or as the students get more sophisticated, I might say, okay, I want you to listen to the word rat. Now change the first sound to what sound do you have now? And you hope that they're able to say mat. Okay, so that's the kind of phoneme substitution or deletion activities that we might do that's really going to support their phonemic awareness. One cute thing that I've been seeing, and you know, if you have little kids in your house, or you know, if you work closely with little kids, as many of you do, you know, these pop-it things are now all the rage. My own daughter has about 75 of them. But these are a great tool for students to use to kind of count the number of phonemes that they hear in a word, you know, telling them push in a dot for every phoneme that they hear. So if I said, okay, we're going to listen for the sounds that we hear in the word cat, they might go cat and pop it in. That's great, just to kind of give them a little something to kind of keep their hands occupied while they're working, or give them that kind of sense and that connection, that tactile connection, if you think that would help. So definitely a tool if you want, you know, you see them at the Dollar Tree or something, you can pick those up. Now here's an example, or a, you know, this is a stare, and you can see how some of these phonological and phonemic awareness activities, they grow from, or they begin with the less complex activities and they move to the more complex activities. So the less complex activities, these are things that you're going to do in like pre-K or in early kindergarten. You're going to inundate them with rhyming songs. You know, we've known this for generations that, you know, these are beneficial, but definitely bring those nursery rhymes out, have the kids recite those nursery rhymes, and then and use those to help them identify those rhyming words. Then we go into sentence segmentation, asking students to maybe move a cube up for every word that they hear in a sentence. You know, you can use Unifix cubes or something, or beans or something like that. Then we have syllable segmentation and blending, okay? Cookie, 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 2 syllables, right? I'm just trying to blend the phonemes for a second. Onset and rhyme blending and segmentation. That again, that initial sound followed by what remains in the word, putting that together. And then finally, as they get fairly proficient with phonological and phonemic awareness, they're able to blend and segment individual phonemes. And if they are proficient with that, you can easily see how that translates to them being able to decode quite easily in text or write, right? If they can listen to a word and then segment those sounds, they're going to be able to do that once they're able to kind of write the letters. So this is important work, and definitely not work that we should kind of gloss over. And again, very important to mention that, you know, a lot of times, like our dyslexic students, one of the earliest indicators of dyslexia is struggles with phonological awareness. So it's not to say that every child who struggles with phonological awareness is going to have dyslexia. But man, if I'm a kindergarten teacher, I'm a first grade teacher, and I notice that these students are really having trouble listening for those sounds and words or producing rhyming words or something like that, that's a kid I'm watching, right? I'm looking for other patterns too. So definitely keep note and keep track of what's going on with their phonological awareness, because it's really important and really helpful for understanding how they're going to be as readers. Now, when it comes to assessing phonological and phonemic awareness, many of our curricula have great resources for this. They have assessments embedded in the curriculum. But if yours doesn't, or you're just one of those people and you want to know more, it's not hard to measure this on your own. Just ask yourself, can the student identify the number of words in a spoken sentence? Can they generate rhyming words? Can they identify syllables and blend syllables in words? Can they identify and blend onsets and rhymes in words? Can they identify and blend phonemes in words, right? You may want to, and you will want to start off with fewer phonemes, maybe 2 or 3 phonemes in a word, and then gradually increase the number of phonemes, right? How many sounds do you hear in the word at? Okay. You would hope that they were able to do 2. And you might introduce 3 phoneme words till you get up to maybe 5 or 6 phoneme words. And where they'll be able to identify all of the different phonemes that they hear in those words. But this is going to paint a really good picture of how your student is when it comes to phonological or phonemic awareness. Now, we're going to switch a little bit over now to phonics or decoding. Now, this is the process of teaching students the principles of letter-sound relationships. So this is not work that can be done in the dark. They need to see the grapheme or the printed letter or double letter spelling or whatever the case may be. And they have to be able to connect what they know about the sound that letter makes to the printed text, how to sound out printed words, and exceptions to those principles, right? We know that O makes the sound ah, but then there are some exceptions to that. We know that if we see that silent E at the end, it's going to make O say its name. So when the word was originally hop, we add that E to the end, and now it becomes hope, right? And as the students become more proficient in their knowledge, they're able to easily identify that and decode those words much more automatically. And again, this work cannot be done in the dark. They need to be able to see those printed letters so that they can actually read it. This is the difference between phonics and phonological awareness. They're very different and they're not the same thing. So keep that in mind. Also, very important, phonics needs to be taught systematically and explicitly, right? You don't just teach them the sound spellings they need for a particular book. Before you even start beginning for the year, you have to have a very clear roadmap of how you're going to introduce these letter sound correspondences. And most of our curricula do a very good job of kind of laying this out in a strategic way where they start out with the most predictable or common letter sound correspondences, and then they gradually introduce the less complex or the more or the less common or the complex correspondences. But if you don't have that, reach out to us. We're glad to help you kind of develop your own roadmap, because the idea is that you're introducing the least ambiguous, the most common spellings first, and then as they become increasingly proficient with those, you introduce those more complex spellings. So definitely be thinking about that if you don't feel that your curriculum or you don't have a curriculum or resources that lay that out. But most of the high quality curricula, the tier 1 curricula that we use, do have that. And you may want to go review it just so that you know yourself the order behind how they've chosen to do that. Now, one thing to remember is that we're teaching pattern recognition and not rule memorization. It's not the olden days where we're just like, okay, I before E except after C. And I saw something on Facebook the other day, and it had like, 100 different reasons why that particular rule didn't work. It had like many different words where that rule didn't work. We're not teaching on rule memorization. We're teaching on pattern recognition, right? We know that most of the time when we see that magic E at the end of the word, it's going to make that the earlier vowel say its name. Might not be the case all the time, but it's a pattern that they can reliably use. Now, Louisa Moats says most individuals learn to decode words in print because they accumulate explicit and tacit knowledge of linguistic patterns, phonological patterns, orthographic patterns, and morphological patterns. It's not just because they remember 100 different rules that always apply. We have a language that is very complex. Our language, we have words that have a foreign basis, right? Where rules wouldn't necessarily apply, but we might learn some of these patterns that we see in foreign words that we are exposed to repeatedly, right? So we're teaching that pattern recognition, not just rule memorization. And it's really important to keep that in mind. Now you might be saying, like, how do I do that? How in the world do I do this in my classroom? It's easy, guys. It's not it's not as complex as it sounds. Some easy ways to do it. Some word sorts with conversation. If you're a first grade teacher, this would be a great time to do this. Write on an index card a bunch of words that have just kind of a short vowel spelling, CVC words, and then have some words with that magic E or that silent E at the end. And then give the students and say, okay, I want you guys to sort these by what you notice, right? Look for similar patterns in these words. And, and if you need to provide support, you can, of course. But hopefully what they're doing is they'll put all of the magic E words together, and then they'll put those short vowel CVC words together, and then have them explain why they group them that way. And hopefully they'll be able to kind of see, okay, oh, these words all go together because they all kind of do the same thing. And these words all go together. That's something easy. And, I used to, as an instructional coach and as an assistant principal, I would always tell my teachers, it doesn't have to be flashy. And it definitely does not have to be, you don't have to put together like, this massive lesson. Sometimes just writing some words on an index card can be the most impactful thing that you can do, and doing a word sort with this. You can also have students analyze words and then discover those patterns, and then introduce more words that have those patterns and have them read those, right? So if I am introducing, say, like the diphthong OI, which says oi, I might ask my student, I might say, okay, this is the word foil. What do you notice about that? And they might say, oh, well, that O and that I, they go together and they say oi. And I would say, yeah, right. These two go together and they make the sound oi. And then I might introduce some other words that have that OI spelling. And I would say, now I want you to read these words: oil, royal, and not like royal king and queen, but things like that. And you can do that with them. And then something very important to know is that writing words after reading them reinforces that pattern knowledge. So when you're done, just like the last 2 minutes of your little session, or your little small group session, have them write the words that they just read. That'll help to cement those patterns in their brain and support their orthographic mapping, which is going to lead to their sight recognition. How do you assess phonics or decoding knowledge? Many of our curricula do have word reading assessments that include words with a particular letter sound correspondences that have been explicitly taught. And that can be a great way to diagnose gaps in code knowledge, right? If I know that a student is really struggling to read any word that has that diphthong, then I know that what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull like a little, I might do a conference, or if I have multiple students, I might do a little small group where I'm zeroing in on that. And you can also analyze records of student reading. I can't emphasize enough how valuable that is, because that gives you so much information about so many different things. Here's an example. If we look at this, we see this little reading record, and it says, what it should say is Jake got a pot, but the child said Jack got a pot. I will set it in the sun, said Jack. In Tim, oh, see, now what I'm starting to see is I'm starting to see a pattern. This child cannot read those words with the magic E. He's really struggling with that. So that's going to be the target of my work with that particular child. And it doesn't have to be a 20-minute lesson. It might just be me taking this and saying, okay, let's analyze this together. Let's look at how you read, pointing that out, and then having them practice reading some more magic E words, right? I guarantee you they won't forget after something like that. They love seeing their own work. And I think it really does help kind of connect their efforts moving forward, because you'll start to see them, getting those words right, or, self-correcting when they're making these same mistakes. Now, when it comes to decoding is that ability to apply your knowledge of letter sound relationships, including that knowledge of letter patterns, to correctly pronounce those written words. Now, as students become more proficient in their knowledge of sound spellings that they've been taught, they're going to be able to use that knowledge to decode words and texts. Now, I used to often have teachers say, oh, these kids, they're decoding everything. But I would tell them that's wonderful, right? Like, that's where they're at in their reading progression. Every student is going to decode at some point. They're not just going to jump from never having seen a letter to fluent reading, right? Decoding is a very important step where they really are sounding out words sound by sound. And as they get more proficient with that, they're going to move in that direction of sight recognition. But it is such an important step. So don't rush it and don't stress out if they're sounding every word out. That's a very important consequential step in their movement towards sight recognition. And really analyze the patterns that you see in their decoding, and give them opportunities to develop proficiency with any areas they might be struggling with. And you'll start to see their fluency will increase, their sight recognition will increase. And it's just a really beautiful thing. Now, when it comes to assessing decoding, when we listen to a student read, can they accurately pair sounds with the word, with the spellings, and then blend those sounds together to read words? Or is their decoding laborious, right? You might give them 2 sentences and it takes them 10 minutes to get through. If that's the case, discontinue, right? You're going to have to do some more work with phonics, and maybe even back down. You're going to have to really support their work with phonological awareness, right? We want them to start getting automatic when they see that the letter P, they know it says, and they're able to decode that quickly. But if they're sitting there thinking for 5 seconds, what sound does the letter P make? You have some more work to do to kind of support that proficiency. And really looking at what they're doing is going to help you know how you need to target their needs. And then as their ability to decode becomes more automatic, typically around mid first grade, that's when we might start measuring their words correct per minute, things like that. You can start to compare their reading to established fluency norms, right? So, we have maybe like the Hasbrook and Tyndall norms that we might use to measure a student's decoding ability. And I'm going to look and see, okay, like I have this student in my class and she's reading 75 words correct per minute at 95% accuracy. Wow, that puts her, above the 90th percentile for first graders at the middle of the year. So I know that she's on track to be successful. But if I also have a first grader who's decoding maybe 5 words correct per minute at 95% accuracy, even though the accuracy is okay, the decoding is so slow that they're really not moving. That might put them below the 25th percentile. So I know we have an issue, and we're going to really try to dig in and see where the breakdown is. Now that brings us to sight recognition. Sight recognition is the ultimate goal of our work with the strands focused on fluent word recognition. Good fluent readers can automatically recognize a large number of words by sight, and this is known as their sight vocabulary. Think about yourself. You don't have to sound out every word. You're not just a super fast decoder. Most of the time, if you see a word, you can recognize that instantaneously. You're not thinking about it. It's just very automatic for you. And that's our goal for students. Adult readers can really recognize between 30,000 and 60,000 words by sight. Now we do encounter sometimes maybe with names or, tier 3 vocabulary jargon that maybe we're unfamiliar with that we do still have to decode. So our knowledge of the code is still very beneficial, right? But most of the words that we read, we recognize by sight. And that's our goal with all of our students. We want our students to be able to read and process what they read at roughly the rate of spoken language, which is approximately 200 words correct per minute. So we're always moving in that direction because, studies consistently show that if we're able to read at that rate, nothing about our word recognition is going to inhibit our comprehension of the text. Okay. Now, through the process of orthographic mapping, which is a brain process, students are able to use that oral language processing part of their brain to map or connect the sounds of the words they already know, the phonemes, to the letters in the words, right? And this comes out of the work of Joan Sedita. But, our brain is like really doing some interesting things as we're learning how to read, but also as we're reading. And through this process of orthographic mapping, which is happening when these little brains are moving from decoding to sight recognition, they're becoming more fluent in their recognition of these patterns and these spelling patterns. And all of this is going together in their brain to develop their ability to recognize words by sight. Then they permanently store these connected sounds and letters of words along with the meaning. And they become our sight vocabulary or our sight words. Now, this is just like a little bit of interesting brain research. But, there have been some really interesting studies that have shown that that words that are learned through letter sound instruction. So this process that we do where we teach students the sounds that letters make and we teach them how to decode, that leads to increased neural activity on the left side of the brain, which encompasses the visual and language regions. However, words learned through just kind of rote memorization, that whole word association, just memorizing words, that shows activity that's more focused on the right hemisphere of the brain. But less left hemisphere activity during those early word recognition stages is strongly associated with skilled readers. And it's often missing in children and adults who struggle with reading. Okay, so it's really interesting. All of that work that we do to develop their ability to decode, it's activating those important parts of the brain that are going to lead to them being more proficient readers. So the work that you're doing is not in vain. Let them struggle. Let them do that work, listening for those sounds and then reading those sounds, reading the letter, the words on the page. That is such important work, and it's activating those really important parts of the brain. So keep that in mind as you move through this process with your students. Just my final thoughts here. Phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition, they each play this hugely important role in developing a student's ability to recognize words quickly and efficiently. We also start with this idea that we teach speech to print, not print to speech. We don't start out by producing a reader and having students kind of guess what words are on the page. No, we start out with that phonological awareness, and we don't drop that. You can introduce the text, these things can overlap, but in the earliest ages, in pre-K and in kindergarten, we're teaching students to listen to the sounds that they hear in words, and we're teaching them speech to print, not print to speech. Phonics needs to be taught systematically and explicitly. Can't emphasize that enough. Have a roadmap for how you're going to introduce all of these sound spellings. Most students who struggle with reading in the early years struggle with word recognition later on. Most students who struggle with reading in the early years, the area that they're struggling with is word recognition. Most students who struggle with phonological awareness early on struggle with reading later on. But most students who we're seeing those struggles with, the area of that struggle is the word recognition part of it, right? So a lot of our remediation efforts are going to be there. Our kids are great, and it's not to say that all of our kids are this way, but oftentimes our kids understand so much. We can read them a read aloud and they can tell us everything in that read aloud. But when we ask them to read something, that's where their breakdown is. It's not to say that's always the case. I know students who really struggle to understand what was being read to them, but yet for some reason they grasped onto the code and they could read the words very easily. But you have to be aware of both. But what we know is that most students who struggle with reading, word recognition is where they're really struggling. And teachers really have to have a deep understanding of how the code works. What sounds do these letters make? What are these patterns that I'm wanting my students to recognize in these words? You need to understand your English language to be able to target their needs. So this is all very, very, very important for you to do and to study. And there are so many resources out there. And as you go through these, the trainings that we soon all teachers will go through, you'll start to really understand the nuances of the code so that you can better support your students. Okay, so now we've come to our engage question. And what I'm going to ask is, I want you to think about, why are the word recognition strands of Scarborough's reading rope essential for developing skilled readers? And what are you going to do to support your students' ability to read words with automaticity? So you can either email me tonight if you're participating in this session live, or you can tweet using the hashtag Louisiana Literacy. And you can do it anytime, but if you send it by 5 p.m. tonight, we'll enter you into a drawing for door prizes and shout outs in our upcoming PD sessions. If you wouldn't mind just taking a second to fill out our session feedback form, they're going to post the link in the chat. And if you have any questions, please never hesitate to contact us at either louisianaliteracy@la.gov, or feel free to reach out to me, sarah.stoneman@la.gov. I am here to help. And, I really want to be here to support you so that you can support your students. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And please keep up the great work and let me know how I can help you. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.